The University of Michigan boasts the most wins in college football history, but the Wolverines will have to win one more in 2023 to hoist a national championship banner for the first time since 1997. For Washington, of course, their last title was in 1991. We have broken down the Wolverines and the Huskies in every possible way. We do so next from the historical angle, both from an all-time perspective, and we'll look at the 21st century. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Let's get to the numbers. All these numbers are up to date thanks to Winsipedia. There's the all-time wins total at 1,003, number one all-time. Washington, number 17 in all of college football at 774. The winning percentage, Michigan, number 2 to Ohio State's number 1 figure. Alabama's at number 3. And they are microscopic percentage points away from each other. Michigan at 733, Washington at 620. That's good for number 22 all time. National championships. Washington has 2. We mentioned the most recent in 1991. Michigan with 11 national championships. That's second to Alabama. Now, you may have to go back quite a ways to find most of those, but they are number 2 all time. On to conference championships. And Washington has won the final conference championship in the Pac-12 and finished number 2 in all-time Pac-8, 10, and 12 championships to USC with 18. That's number 22 in the nation. Michigan, 3 consecutive Big Ten championships. They own 6 this century. They've got 45 total Big Ten championships. That's number 3 in total conference championships. Bowl games, Washington's played in 41. They own a bowl record of exactly 20, 20, and 1. They're at 500. And you see Michigan playing in 51 bowl games. Consider for Big Ten teams, most of them don't rank at the very top of college football in bowl game appearances because only one team from the conference prior to 1975 would go to a bowl game. It was Rose Bowl or bust for the Big Ten champion, and no other Big Ten teams were allowed to go to bowl games. The win percentage for Michigan, 1-6 under Jim Harbaugh going into this season. Of course, the Rose Bowl win under Harbaugh against Bama last weekend raises Michigan's record to 22-29. That's a 43% winning percentage. Consensus All-Americans, as you might think, Michigan with a resounding lead over Washington here. Michigan is number 3 in the nation with 88. Washington has 24. That's good for number 31. Heisman Trophy winners. Washington has yet to gain a Heisman Trophy. Of course, Michael Penix finished very close this past season. Michigan has 3. The most recent in that national championship season of 1997, Charles Woodson. NFL draft selections. Michigan's at number 5 all-time in college football with 401. Washington has done rather well in the NFL draft with 315. That's number 17. First-round NFL draft selections, we've got Washington with 28 all-time. That's 22nd best in the country. And you see where Washington generally ranks around 15th to 25th in all these major categories across the board. Michigan all-time in first-round selections, ranking number 7 in college football at 51. Now, in terms of ranking in the AP poll, how many weeks have these schools been ranked in the top 25? Currently, it was a top 20 at one point. It was a top 10 during the 1960s for about 7 or 8 years. Washington, 480 weeks spent in the AP poll. That's number 20 in college football. Michigan has been ranked in the AP poll 918 weeks. That's number 2 all time. 35 weeks at number 1. That's 13th in college football for Michigan. Washington has 15 weeks at number 1. That's 21st best in all of college football. We went through the same exercise with Alabama and Michigan prior to their matchup, and of course we're comparing the two schools all time. That's one obvious comparison to make. Go all the way back to the beginning of college football and add up all the numbers. Now, if you're going to go with the second measurement, what do? Do you look at the last 5 years, the last 10 years, the last 20 years, the last 50 years, since 2000, since 1950? When? Well, there's no perfect comparison. Obviously, it depends on your preference, your age, what you're looking at historically. All right, so let's understand that we could go through this exercise and we could take every year throughout the history of college football and compare these two programs. And we know that Michigan has been far more successful than Washington, so there's really no comparison in regards to trying to see who's better all time. This is not a comparison between Michigan and Alabama or Michigan and Ohio State or two elites of the sport, two blue bloods. Washington has had a storied football history, but it does not compare to Michigan. Still, we would like to gauge it more recently since, of course, Michigan and Washington both go way back into the early 1900s and before. So let's go to the 21st century. Seems pretty logical, right? And again, we could go through this exercise through any period of time, but we just choose to do the 21st century since the year 2000. Let's take a look. Michigan, since the year 2000, has won 207 games. Keep in mind, they're 39-3 the last 3 years. Prior to that, we're looking at a program that was 168-88, so not above that 66.7 2-to-1 ratio winning percentage prior to this hot run of 3 Big Ten championships and college football playoff appearances in a row. Washington had a downturn from the year 2000 until 2008, so they were 11-1 in that 2000 season, won the Rose Bowl over Drew Brees and Purdue, and then after that, they took a nosedive. They had a stretch where the Huskies went 44-64. Take that away, and they have been generally in contention. Of course, had a nice run under Chris Peterson, going to the college football playoff in 2016, going to a Fiesta Bowl and Rose Bowl in 2017 and 18. 166-130 is Washington's record since the year 2000. Conference championships, Michigan has 6. 2 of those are shared in the year 2000 and in 2004. The other 4 are just in the last 3 years, of course. And then they have 1 other outright championship since the year 2000. For Washington, it's all outright championships, 4. And then when we look at the AP rankings, we looked at Michigan's dominance over Washington in the AP rankings all time. Let's look at since 2000. It's a little bit closer here, although Michigan has been more consistent in being ranked 16 of the 24 seasons since the year 2000, 16 of 24. For Washington, it's 8. And then top 10 finishes, Michigan 7, and I'm including this season because they are going to finish in the top 10 for sure. Washington at 4, and again, I include this season with top 5 finishes, both with 3, and for Michigan, that's obviously the last 3 seasons. So prior to this run in 2021, Michigan had not finished in the top 5 since going all the way back to 1999 when they won that Orange Bowl game against Alabama. Bowl games, Michigan not that successful here in the 21st century at 6-14. Washington is 7-8. Major bowl games, Michigan got its 2nd of the century this past weekend in the Rose Bowl. They also won the Sugar Bowl against Virginia Tech after the 2011 season. For Washington, 2-3. Lost a Fiesta Bowl to Penn State and lost to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl following a college football playoff appearance, lost to Alabama in 2016. Their wins come in the Rose Bowl 23 years ago with Marcus Tuiasosopo at quarterback against Purdue, and then the other win, obviously, just the other night against Texas. And in the college football playoff, there it is. Each school just gained its first win in the college football playoff. NFL draft selections, Michigan with a decided advantage over Washington this century with 115 selections in the NFL draft to 62 for Washington. First round picks, Michigan leads 19-12. No comparison between these two schools, either all-time or in the last 23 seasons since 2000. Michigan all-time's an elite, arguably the greatest. Washington's in that top 20 range. And then here in the last 23 years, going back to the beginning of this century, Michigan more in the top 10 to 15 range. Take out the Brady Hoke and Rich Rod years in which they cratered, of course. They were a 500 team from 2008 to 14 when Jim Harbaugh took over. And then those other seasons, they did not compete for national championships. They had a lot of 9-3 type seasons. And thus the record, even under Jim Harbaugh, a lot of 9-3 type seasons. And now elite status returns for Michigan here in the last 3 years. owning the Big Ten, college football playoff appearances, and now one step away from a national championship. Add it all up, and you see the aggregate numbers that Michigan's been roughly top 10 to 15 program over the course of this century. Washington, very inconsistent. Had a nice run under Chris Peterson. Went to 3 consecutive New Year's 6 bowl games, Alabama, Penn State, Ohio State, in losing all 3 of those games. And then, of course, Kalen DeBoer's done a remarkable job in lifting them to 2 top 10 finishes and within one step of a national championship. They're first since 91, but also the doldrums of going 0-12. Can you imagine 0-12 almost 20 years ago and a 44-64 run? So Washington football was certainly down. And then, of course, again, Chris Peterson lifted them up after the Steve Sarkisian era, which was rather marginal. They went to bowl games, but they were nothing special, did not finish ranked during that time. Washington's in that top 20 range, both all-time and, again, this century. Love looking at the numbers, love looking at the historical perspective on everybody here at the Voice of College Football. We are going to break down all the programs all-time. And for those of you who have been around here at the Voice of College Football during other off seasons, hey, we look forward to this. We get your input, and we go through all the rankings for all the schools in all the categories. We're not just talking about, hey, winning percentage or most wins or anything like, no. We run through the gamut all the way through all sorts of metrics in comparing the programs, and we will have our program rankings all time, and then we will rank the programs for 2023 as well. We do it where? Here, right here at the Voice of College Football.